Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show. My name is Mark Devlin, and I'm here with co-hosts Mary Devlin and Mark Zegveldt, who will be joining us in just a second when he gets his camera sorted out. Mary, what are you going to be talking about today?
Well, tonight I'm going to be talking about what comes around goes around as Circularity Scotland files debts of over £86 million, just the start of the costs of Lorna Slater's bottle return scheme disaster.
Oh, and what a disaster it has been. Now, because we were worried about Mark there, I didn't do the proper introduction. This is Scotland's number one politics chat. Here. Hi, Mark. How are you tonight?
Good evening.
Right, okay, I'm glad you managed to get with us there. Just not to throw you straight into it, but what are you going to be talking about tonight?
I'm going to talk about the PM's visit to Aberdeen and Alistair Jack's attack on the independent citizenship.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's very good. Okay. And of course, we're all going to be talking about Margaret Ferrier getting the boot and what comes after that.
And of course, we have Zoomer of the Week.
Right, so great. We'll have all that and much more in just a moment once I figure out where the titles are. Okay, here we go. Right, welcome back to Scotland's number one politics chat. I'm the host, Mark Devlin. And here tonight, the co-hosts Mary Devlin and Mark Zegveldt, who many of you know from Twitter. And, well, she's now called X, partly. And that's very confusing for all of us. No thanks, or thanks to Elon Musk, I suppose. Mark, you've been having some Twitter or X spaces, I suppose we should now call them.
Yes.
And how have those been going?
Great, yeah. We did one on education with Lorna Cameron. That was a really good space. We're going to do a follow-up on it. So, and tomorrow night I'm doing one just on general Scottish politics.
Okay, so quite busy. They go on for quite a long time though, right?
Yeah, 3 to 4 hours they can go on for.
Right, so I think it's good if you could just put it on in the background and then just listen to it while you're doing other stuff, perhaps you can give your full attention to it. I suppose it's up to yourself. Right, okay. We have new stuff on the show, which is that if you really like what we're doing and if you're new, hold on and you'll see how great this show is. But if you're a regular viewer, we would really appreciate if you could donate to the show, help our running costs a little bit. And you can do that with the new feature on YouTube especially, which is super thanks and super stickers. And those should appear on the screen. You should get a shout out from that. And if you're not on YouTube, please go to the Majority site and put in a donation there. It would be most appreciated.
And sharing is caring. So wherever you are, please like, share, comment, tell your friends. Extend our reach at the click of a button.
And of course, a huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages, where many of you are watching from tonight. They've been They have supported us for a long time. Thank you very much to them.
Thank you. And as usual, I'll be handling all your comments, so please try to make them short and snappy. I'll try to get as many up on screen as I can.
In a few minutes, we're going to talk about money wasted in Lorna Slater's failed deposit schemes. But first, we're going to talk about Maggie, out. In stunning news from Rutherglen yesterday, Margaret Ferrier, COVID Maggie, was booted out of Westminster by Rutherglen constituents. In the petition that was signed by 11,896 people out of 81,124, which is 14% of the constituents, well above the 10% required. So, okay, thought maybe it would be useful for us to have a wee review of what happened with the story so far. Okay, right, strap in for this one. Okay, so Saturday, September 26th, 2020, which is quite some time ago, Ferrier said that she had mild COVID symptoms, and the advice at that time was to self-isolate for 10 days and book a test. But in the meantime, she visited lots of places, including a beauty salon, And then the next day, she went to Mass and also went to a bar, as you do. The prosecutor said Ferrier subsequently failed to isolate pending the outcome of the test. Then on Monday 28th, she travelled to London on a train with 183 other people on board, as she probably saw them as people she could infect. Transport Scotland at that time said you should stay at home if you or anyone in your household is experiencing coronavirus symptoms or is self-isolating. Then on the Monday night in London, she had a positive test result. She gave, somewhat ironically, she gave a speech on coronavirus at the House of Commons while waiting for the result. And just after that, she got the result, and then she took a train back to Glasgow with 153 potential infectees.
But it's not just the people on the train, it's all the people along the way.
Yes.
I mean, if she was in London, let's say she either got in a taxi or she went on the tube system, and she had to get all the way through the station to actually get on the train. So we're talking probably thousands of people.
Yeah, and a hotel. I mean, of course, she stayed in a hotel as well, apart from the places she deliberately went to. And, of course, all the people in the House of Commons. And now I don't know if that coronavirus what speech was well attended, but, obviously there are people in there as well. And I think that's perhaps...
And people in the streets.
Well, yes, well, that's why she got censured in the end, actually. Right, so basically after she informed, in the Wednesday, she informed the SNP and the House of Commons, who began contact tracing, a bit late perhaps. And then on October the 1st, she reported herself to the police and to Sturgeon, and she released a statement. Very sorry for my mistake, and acknowledged that she should have self-isolated. Then she was booted out the SNP, but they couldn't force her to stand down as an MP at all.
Well, I think another thing to bring in here is that if you remember back in September 2020, I mean, that was only 6 months after coronavirus had started. And at that point, we were still very scared. People didn't know just how bad it was going to be.
Right.
We didn't know quite how infectious it was. There was no sign of any vaccine at that time.
No, I know.
So people were really, really scared, and they were taking every general precaution that they could.
Yeah, and I think people didn't really know. I mean, now we can look back in hindsight and say, right, well, it really only affected older people or people whose health is compromised already. Now, people in the audience may have different opinions, not different opinions, may have different examples and that, and it's fair enough to put them through there. But that's the general perception. But then it was like, oh, it's going to affect anyone, and for any reason, all these stories coming out, people even our age who were dying suddenly and all this type of stuff. Not dying suddenly, dying.
And young people were getting affected as well.
Yeah. And so it was a bit of
pregnant women.
There was a lot of fear definitely going on at that time. Excuse me.
She should set an example as well.
Well, that is of course
as a politician.
Yes,
she'd have known all the facts. She'd have been privy to all the information even before we were, and. To do, I personally can't understand whatsoever why she did. I don't even know the motives of doing what she did.
Well, I think she just wanted to go home. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? She just wanted, I don't know.
I mean, otherwise she would have to have stayed in a hotel in London.
For 10 days.
First of all, when you're waiting on a result, I mean, you don't go and get a test unless you think there's some chance that you might be infected. So she can't say, well, I didn't think I was infected, because why would you go for a test? So she went for a test, and she should have just stayed at home at that point and said, look, I can't come down to London. But she did go to London. And then when she got the positive result, she was in a hotel. So she's probably thinking, I don't want to pay for a hotel for 2 weeks.
Well, she get that in expenses. But,
okay, well, I don't want to stay in a hotel.
But there's no need for it to go in the first place. She didn't need to go to London.
She didn't need to go.
She did everything by video. She didn't. There's no reason for it to go to London.
I think the House of Commons would have carried on.
But I did notice actually today when I was reading about this that she was actually one of the people who we always talk about lazy SNP MPs, and she is actually one of the most active MPs in the House of Commons. She's basically down there every day, and including the day like Fridays when it's not even. There's only like a half day, or they sometimes have stuff on there. So she's actually she's second best attendance.
Maybe she likes the canteen food.
Well, maybe something like that. So perhaps she had this, feeling of duty, perhaps, a weird sense of duty that or obligation that she had to go there. But of course, that's not the point. That's the thing. So
not just that. I mean, her actions afterwards don't don't show a person who has feels strong moral obligations, do they?
Not
The fact that
particularly.
she's been there for 3 years.
Well, that's the thing about it. So basically, she said that after.
Sorry, someone says here, being active does not mean she's any
Well,
good.
I know, of course, we know that, but we do always complain about people like Mary Black not appearing and,
Yeah, not
and stuff
turning
like
up at
that.
all.
She actually did appear, and for what it's worth, and took part in debates and Prime Minister's questions and so on. Yeah, so she was hung out to dry. She said she was hung out to dry by Sturgeon and Blackford, who'd basically said you had better resign straight away, and they kicked her out of the party. But anyway, later on, she was arrested and charged with couple and reckless conduct. That was in January 2021, so about 3 or 4 months later. 2 months later?
No, four.
Right, okay. And then she pled guilty in August 2022, and she had to carry out 270 hours of community service. And then in 2023, the Common Standards Committee recommended she should be suspended. And then she appealed that. And then that went to an independent committee. And they said, no, it's going to happen. And then they voted to suspend her. And that triggered the recall motion and the petition, which we've just heard the results of. So now what happens next? The date for the by-election. I mean, immediately, as soon as that result came out, that was her out. So the date for a by-election will be set for when Parliament resumes in September, most likely October. We're hearing the earliest date is October the 5th. Why do you think it took 3 years, Mark?
I've absolutely no idea why it would take 3 years. If she'd had any kind of morals, she would have stepped down immediately. But obviously, it's down to money, isn't it?
Well, I think that's actually a very good point there, because her MP's salary, £86,000, £584, and that means that she was paid in those 3 years £235,000 of taxpayers' money. £235,000. Wow, that's a lot.
She'd find that hard to get in Greggs and Rutherglen.
Well, yes, well, without robbing it, I suppose. Yeah, plus expenses. Of course, there's no expenses during that time as well. I mean, she says, she's not going to stand again, though, at least. I decided some time ago that I would not stand in the upcoming by-election. This has been a difficult and taxing process that has now come to its conclusion. I do not wish to prolong it further. Well, why did you prolong it in the first place? That's the question to that.
For me, if she'd have said, well, I'm going to stand as an independent because I don't believe I did. I'm still working for my constituencies, and they're more important to me, and she'd have stood. Then I might have understood that. But she's waited all this time, and now she knows she's not going to stand again. I don't. Yeah. It makes it even, for me, it makes it worse.
Yeah, it's well. Then the conclusion has to be that it's just she just in it for the money. But I don't. Perhaps not. I mean,
I think she's in it for the money. I mean, absolutely.
Who wouldn't stay for the money? I mean, that's the thing. You would want to drag it out as much as you could, because I think it's not so much the money. I think it's that she's got no alternative, as you say, Mary. She won't get that type of money in Greggs. And what kind of employment would she look for afterwards? I don't think she was particularly trained in anything.
Well, she must have accumulated quite a bit as she went along. That's quite a decent salary.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
She should have a decent pension scheme. She'll get her MP pension scheme, won't she?
All that as well.
So I'm sorry, I'm not feeling sorry for her on the financial front.
Yes, no, I don't think so.
And most of us, I think, would be hanging our heads in shame and be scared to show our face. Yes. Never mind just clocking up the salary for another 3 years.
Yeah, it's a bit weird that she did that. And even SNP, of course, have been on her case and saying that they want to have a fresh start. We'll come on to that in just a second.
Sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what has she done in them 3 years as well? What has she done for the constituency?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? She has, as I said, had decent attendance, but has she actually been able to do anything for her constituents? So, anyway. Yes. So, anyway, the campaign now has already started. And so we have... This first question is, will this be a referendum on Humza Yousaf? Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think it will be. I think it will be seen as on whether he's doing a good job or not. But I also think it's going to be a really low turnout.
Right. Well, why do you think
Be a
that?
protest. I think it could be a protest vote against him.
You mean by the SNP? There would be a
by the voters of the SNP. I think they might. Some will go to Labour, and I think the others will stay at home.
Okay, Mark, do you mind moving? You need to move in a wee bit to the centre of the frame as well. All right. Yeah, I mean, Humza himself said that this was, well, he was asked today whether a vote for the SNP in the by-election was a vote of support for independence, and he said it was this by-election, very simply, I think in simple terms, yes, it's about independence, because independence is the only sure way to scrap cruel Tory policies. But equally, it will be a stark choice for people in Rutherglen and Hamilton West. You vote for an SNP MP that stands up for the country, stands up for your constituency, or you vote for a Labour MP that backs Keir Starmer's position on the two-child limit and the bedroom tax. So obviously their main target, of course, is Labour. I've got some interesting points about this. But first of all, the two-child limit is a policy that's supported by most Scots. We still showed some polling on that last week. Not to mention that the SNP could allocate spending to it right now if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So it seems like you're campaigning. What are you actually campaigning on? The real issue, of course, I think for most people is the cost of living, health service, all these type of real life issues. And he's still going on about independence is the way to do these things, and then talking about their pet project things. I mean, overall, you have the question: does anyone think that Humza Yousaf can lead Scotland to independence? It's a ludicrous concept. So I think that's a bit strange. And then there's also this weirdness of the SNP saying that a vote for them is a vote for change. That's just obviously not true. This is yes. It's very weird. Yeah, we have this thing here.
Peace is war.
Oh yeah, sorry.
War is peace.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it? Wendell, let's go back to here. So I have this one here. This is Claire Hoy, MSP. Day one of the campaign. Katy is the only candidate offering change. What's that? And she goes on also about, she actually does mention about the cost crisis, but saying it's because of Westminster and Tory policies like the two-child benefit cap, which Labour support. Although even though it's extremely unpopular thing. So this is a bit weird, this thing trying to say that they're the change.
16 years of this government and they're saying change from this. So an SNP candidate is saying, let's change from the SNP.
It's nuts. Well, actually, that's right. I mean, you're right, actually. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, let's have a change from the SNP. It's very
well. That would be campaigning that we could agree with, wouldn't it?
Yes. Well, that is part.
That's the only campaigning that they would have that we would agree with.
I think it's down to they've got nothing else. They can't protect their own legacy that we've been doing for the last 16 years. They can't campaign on the health service or education or all the issues, the local council's budget. They can't go and campaign on that because it's such a bad legacy what they've got. It's so bad what they've been doing. So they can't actually campaign on that. So they're struggling. From what it looks like, they are struggling on a campaign message. They haven't got one. So they come out with the "Let's change," which.
It's like, well, it's one side, it's continuity on one side and change on the other side. You could, what do they make their minds up? Can they not make their minds up?
Are they saying let's change from Sturgeon?
Well, they know, but then Humza Yousaf, who's leading this campaign, really is basically saying, yeah, well, okay, we want change, but actually I'm the continuity candidate. So, right, okay.
Mixed messages.
I don't get it at all. I think we'll need to look into that and see what change. What is the change that they're offering?
Well, the change is, well, that's a good point, isn't it? The change is that if you get Labour and get change, we'll offer the same. Right. So
I
anyway,
don't know.
it's very, very bizarre. Anyway, but it doesn't actually, to be honest, we talk a lot about in the show about, okay, SNP will go to Labour and so on. Of course, everyone wants Labour to win this seat.
Well, no, not everyone wants Labour to win. I mean, Conservatives don't want Labour to win.
Some Conservatives don't want Labour to win. We'll come to that in a second.
I think a lot of us think that Labour might win.
Yeah, well, okay. It seems that Labour is in position to win, and if Labour does win, then this will be a resounding victory, resounding message against Scottish nationalists. Anyway, right? Because surely, they would be closer to after all these years, all this great governance they've been doing for all this time, they'd be closer to their goals. But I think there's a few maybe flies in the ointment here, because the Labour candidate, Michael Shanks, seems determined to me to let the SNP win by continuing Scottish Labour's fight with UK Labour. Here we go. This is ridiculous here. Scottish Labour candidate vows to be his own man when it comes to Westminster. That's not the point, actually. So basically, he backs getting rid of the two child benefit cap and the bedroom tax, and wants self-identification for trans people, which are all SNP policies. Right? Okay. They're all SNP policies. So, and they're all against what Keir Starmer has basically said over the past few weeks. Keir Starmer's trying his best to get elected, and Scottish Labour are trying their best to get him not elected for some reason by deciding to pick a fight on these issues that are decided at UK policy level. So,
well, Michael Shanks wasn't the most popular candidate. He wasn't the one that people wanted, was he?
That's correct. He was kind of flown in.
I think he was fourth or something, fourth most popular.
Yes.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think when they go down on the doorsteps and they start campaigning for this, I think people are just going to be confused. They're going to get a lack of interest, and they're going to say, well, who am I voting for? What's the difference between all the parties? Apart from independents, what's the difference? And I think people are so sick of what's going on. I think there will be an extremely low turnout.
Yeah, I think it's kind of it's definitely a weird one. Oh, am I stuck again? What's going on?
Yep, it's gone again.
I'm back.
Nope, not yet. Can you hear us, Mark?
Yeah, I can see both of you and hear you.
Yeah,
Mark is just a bit frozen there.
I'm a bit frozen.
Come on, Mark.
Yeah,
Come
I'm back again.
Let's warm you up.
Jeez, this is hopeless tonight. But anyway, we can continue the discussion. I think there's possibility, because it's a bit of a weird thing. We have an SNP candidate that wants change and doesn't want the 2-bedroom tax, wants self-ID and all this, but the Labour candidate wants exactly the same things. So
as SNP.
It's a very weird thing. But you've talked about this idea of the Golden Bridge. Can ex-SNP be attracted to Labour? Well, I don't know. Does that being the same as SNP but not having independence, is that a reason enough to go back? I don't think so. Actually, I think that Scottish Labour in particular has to have a clear distinction in their main policies so that people will go back to them. And this kind of wishy-washy, I don't know why they chose this guy. He actually was in the Labour Party, and then he left the Labour Party over Brexit. He's an ardent Remainer. He's basically against the entire UK Westminster policy, and I wonder actually if he would even what his views are on a second independence referendum, because he already holds half of the policies that the SNP have. I just don't understand it, why they got this guy. I'm sure, irrespective of his personality or anything, I don't know anything about his personality, but why we have this person to make it so hard for anyone to vote for? It's even for Labour people to vote for. It's very weird.
I wonder who's doing the strategy at Scottish Labour.
Well, you'd think they were doing better before. This is the thing. And
actually, if they just kept their mouths shut, they would do a lot better.
Yes, that's part of it. It's very strange. And then, not to make things worse, we have the idiot Scottish Tories who have, in their wisdom, decided to field Thomas Kerr as a candidate. Now, Thomas Kerr, I haven't met him, and I followed him a long time on Twitter, and he seems like a good guy. He's always talking to his constituents. He's a councillor, always talking about people in the local area. Really great, and
he seems very nice.
He seems like an asset. But the thing is, why are the Scots Tories putting him into a seat where they can't win? I mean, maybe it gives them some exposure, but the thing is, it's like, why would you? You should put a no. I think you should just have put a nobody in there, right?
Yeah, they're going to lose anyway.
So they're going to lose anyway. Why sacrifice Thomas's career almost in a way and give him a big fail there? And why confuse Conservatives, many of whom are very willing to give their vote to Labour to give the Nationals are doing? Instead, you go like, oh well, Tom's a nice guy on one side, and you go, oh, but I need to get rid of the Nationalists. It's like, why even indulge that?
Well, I think
at best, all they're going to do is split the vote.
Yes, I know, and they could split the vote, and it's
I think Scottish Labour are more concerned about the UK results than the Scottish results. I think they don't want Labour they don't want them to have such a big win, because then that will make Labour more powerful in Westminster.
It's just
for the elections coming up.
It's really just one seat, and also it's
going to get a lot of exposure.
And if that was the case, why didn't they choose a candidate who was more aligned with what UK Labour would want, rather than a kind of renegade Scottish Labour type of guy who's going to stand up against all their policies? You're like, what is this kind of keeping them honest thing? That's an SNP line. It's ridiculous. So we've had some people on there saying, trying to defend why Thomas Kerr was put up there, and putting out scare stuff about Labour and not being pro-UK and all this type of nonsense. And I think this is a good message I saw on Twitter here. This little lady, Mary Watson, said she was talking back to this guy called John White. Sorry, John, as a Scottish Conservative member and a supporter of Thomas Kerr, I will be encouraging everyone I know to back the only candidate to get rid of the toxic SNP. The only candidate come close to do that is Michael Shank's Labour. Now, that's the thing. He can win, but this is the problem. It's the poison chalice, isn't it, to some extent? It's like you win, and then you've got this guy. At some point, you have to say, what's most important to you? The most important thing is to beat the Nationalists. And the reality is the best result for everyone in Scotland, including Tories, including Scottish Tory party, is for Labour to win this election resoundingly.
Yes.
Because that kills nationalism, and it says to the Nationalists, this is over. You cannot win elections anymore. That's it. Come back and get ready to win an election with Labour against the Tories. That should be the Tory strategy. You should make everything possible to make it easier for SNP to come back to Labour, and even for people in Scotland to lend their vote to Labour as well. So I just think this seems very messy and unnecessarily messy by Labour and the Tories in this. And it should be just straightforward. It should be just a guy in Labour. It should be a guy who says, right, yeah, Keir Starmer's right. We want to win the general election. We'll just shut up about everything else. How difficult is that?
Just looks as if they're not actually ready.
Yeah.
This has been known for quite a while that this was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That there was going to be a recall, but they just don't seem to be ready.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree.
I think that's very true. It feels amateurish.
There's no coordinated strategy.
Yes, but I want to be clear. I'm not asking for Thomas to stand down or the Tory candidate to stand down or for any type of alliance. It's not like that. It's just like, why put a guy who will actually attract votes in there when you're going to lose anyway, and it's going to split the vote? It's daft. Leave him for the good stuff when you've got a good chance. That's what I would say. Right.
Well, some people have said just to get him the experience, then give him and then put him up for a seat that he can actually get later.
It's possible, but it's a bit weird if you ask me.
I think it's a risky strategy.
Yes, it's not that good because people are torn. Like that person there on Twitter, they're torn. They say, "Right, I'd really like him. I would like to vote for you, but I'm not, and we can't recommend that." Right? So nonsense. If, for example, even if we like him. Irrespective of party, actually, it could be from another party, whatever. It's just in the personality. He's a nice guy. Anyway, all right, okay. So glad you've been with us through these issues that we've had tonight. It's just been ongoing, and hope you'll stay with us. Next part is going to be all about oil and gas, and that's going to be Mark's going to be talking about that. But first of all, if you do like what we're doing, please do donate using a super thanks or super sticker, or go to our website and donate there. Everything will be used to fund our fight against toxic nationalism. Right, so we'll be back in a second with Mark. Right, Mark, you're up.
Yeah, the PM went to Aberdeen and he announced new oil and gas licenses, and the Acorn project, a share of £2 billion investment into the Acorn project.
What is the Acorn project, Mark?
It's the carbon,
Capture?
Yeah, the carbon capture. That the SNP wanted.
Yes.
The SNP have been crying out for this for a while, and they've got it. And Stephen Flynn's gone very quiet on it. He wouldn't make any comments. He's not congratulated this announcement. He's never made any comments about it. The PM is looking after energy security in the UK, for the whole of the UK, saving thousands of oil and gas jobs, while the SNP Greens would halt all new investment, which would cost thousands of jobs.
Yeah, I think
there's like 100,000 jobs up there, right?
Yeah,
that depend on oil and gas. I mean, that's a big chunk.
And it's a big investment, and it's a big, it
generates a lot of money.
Generates a lot of money. And the Greens have said, and the SNP, that they would stop all new investments, so there'd be no drilling of any more oil wells. So that not only costs jobs, but it also costs the energy security of the country.
Yeah, that's what Sunak was talking about, wasn't it? He was saying that finally they've woken up to the idea that we need to have energy security. We can't be relying on, far-flung countries in Europe who are getting pipes through from Russia.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I
mean,
it's also this understanding that if you're transporting oil and gas from somewhere else, then that increases the carbon amount in it. If you're a believer in the carbon gods, that is the carbon capture thing at Acorn. Now, one thing I do want to mention about this is that this is basically an untried technology. They haven't actually done anything with this, and there's a lot of stuff where they say, right, we're going to do this, put billions of pounds into this. And I think this may be we often talk on this show about companies coming to the government and saying, here, we've got a great plan. It's going to cost us X billion or million. We talked about this in Lorna Slater, for example, in the DRS, and now it's on Hook, which Mary will talk about a little bit later. But I've got a feeling that this carbon capture thing is just the same thing writ large. A company comes and says, well, give us $2 billion to meet your green goals, which are arbitrary and just made up. Then, of course, the government wants to say that. So in a way, we're a beneficiary of this, because to some extent, Sunak's playing decent politics, because you can say, okay, we want more jobs, but we're going to capture the carbon, right? We're going to make more carbon, we're going to capture the carbon. Right? So he can maybe get away with it, I think, in that case. Yeah, and I think it's the politics as well. Well, he's announcing all this extra money into Scotland, and the energy security and more jobs for the oil and gas sector. What's the First Minister doing? First Minister is coming up with this independence paper for a passport, and what colour this mythical passport will be. Yes. That's what the First Minister's doing, while the Prime Minister is actually in Aberdeen saving jobs and creating jobs and investing into the country. Yeah, that's what he's doing, and the difference between the two is quite stark, and it just shows you. Yeah, I think
priorities.
I think it does show priorities, and it just shows a bit of strategy, at least perhaps. SNP is in a weird position now. Instead of going for economic growth and prosperity through oil and gas taxation, which of course was basically underwrote their entire prospectus for independence for almost the entirety of their existence. It's our oil, as we all know, and of course not. Of course, It's not our oil. It's the UK's oil. Always has been the UK's oil. And you can talk about nationalism as greed. Trying to take all that for yourself is just a greedy proposition, which of course nationalism is based on. But that aside, now they're stuck. Welded themselves to the Greens on an oil rig in the middle of the sea, it seems, and they are basically now they can't do anything. They can't. They're like the Greens. They can't say anything about these jobs because they can't be seen to be supporting the fields. And Sturgeon came out and she's like. Came out of hiding and made a statement today saying, "Oh, but what about our carbon targets and all this nonsense and climate change and all this?" And people were just like, "Well, okay, well, didn't you? How are you going to pay for it? There's no economic growth with these Greens."
But it just shows you their policy is all over the place.
Yeah.
It's all over. What 1 minute they're saying, well, they've got the money from the oil, which is going to drive the economy. And then another minute they're saying, well, no, we're going to get rid of the oil and gas because of the environment. They're actually all over the place. They don't, from one day to another, they change the stance on it. It's all depending on the price of oil. If it's high, it's our oil.
Oh, I know. I mean, even if it goes up, it's because now they're stuck with the Greens, right? The Greens, and we been different things. People posted something during the week. Stephen Daisley posted, "Here's my things to improve the SNP's chances for election. Get rid of the Greens and so on." No.
Sorry, Mark. A little bit of breaking news on the Greens here.
Yeah, what's that?
Former Green Party leader Robin Harper has quit the party.
Oh, right, okay. Well,
one down.
Whatever. Yeah, but this idea that I lost my train.
Sorry about that, Mark. You were talking about the Greens.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that they're so desperate to have the Greens in there for what? What's the point of that? Oh yeah, what I was saying was Stephen Daisley wrote his article here how to help the SNP by get rid of the Greens. It's like, no, keep the Greens in there. It's killing them. It's killing the whole thing. It's killing them. This is great. This is the thing. You don't need to. Napoleon, he said, don't interrupt your enemy when they're destroying themselves. And, people like Daisley and these other pundits are like, oh yeah, we'll give them advice. Imagine Napoleon going, oh, Russians aren't doing that quite right. Can you attack us a bit better? Like, come on.
I think it's an internal fight as well with the SNP. I think there's quite a few in the SNP that believe. I think they're saying that the Greens are killing the party. But Humza needs them to hold on to power.
I don't think he actually does. I think he's just scared, actually. Really.
Well, if they didn't have the Greens, then they would just have to actually act politically, which means like making alliances and getting people on your side and so on to get votes through. That's how normal politics works.
You think the Greens wouldn't vote with them in the budget and stuff like that? Maybe they were tired of their demands. But they can just say to them, walk then. Who are you going to vote with? You're going to vote with the Tories or Labour? Right, well then we're just going to give you a hard time over that. It's not that complicated, really. Anyway, maybe it's complicated for Humza, though, that is. Right, moving on. We're going to move on for this section, actually, a little bit, and do Mary's section, because we're going to run a bit late, otherwise, Mark. Okay, So, right, Mary, you'll be up next, and you're going to be talking about circularity. The wheels in the bus go round and round. Back in a second. The wheels in the gravy bus, perhaps.
Well, actually, Mark, the wheels have fallen off the bus.
Oh, okay.
This week, we found out that the company responsible for running Scotland's deposit return scheme, the dreaded DRS, Circularity Scotland, they have collapsed with debts and liabilities of more than £86 million, and they only have assets of £2 million. So I'm quite incredulous at this, and I don't know if other people find the same thing, but let me talk a bit more. Circularity Scotland is a non-profit company funded by the drinks industry.
Right.
So somehow all the drinks companies were persuaded to make this company so that it could run the DRS scheme. But so now with these, it's collapsed and there's £86 million of debt. The Scottish Government and Lorna Slater are saying that they don't have any obligation to pay them compensation.
Right.
Now, the largest creditor is Biffa, which is a giant waste management firm. They're responsible for collecting and recycling bottles and cans for the scheme. They are owed £65 million. So can you imagine how angry the drinks industry, that people in the drinks industry that set up Circularity Scotland, I guess they're on the hook now to BIFA for £65 million.
Right.
The bit I really don't understand is, how can BIFA be owed £65 million? Right, the service hadn't actually started, so everyone's saying, "Oh, but it's for equipment and infrastructure and so on." That I understand, but why are they paying them £65 million and they're not? Circularity Scotland is not actually owning any of the assets, so they're not getting any service. Because it hasn't started. BIFA haven't supplied a service, and they're paying £65 million. Because BIFA are investing in possibly, I don't know if they're investing in land or whether they're investing in, buildings or equipment or whatever.
Right, surely.
But if you're paying the £65 million, shouldn't it belong to Circularity Scotland?
Well, isn't it contractual obligations? Most likely, they signed contracts to say with BIFA and whatever to probably produce, to do whatever. You do stuff for us, and or more likely, BIFA says we'll do stuff for you,
right?
And then they said, but and BIFA probably said, well, yes, it's all legal, and Lorna Slate said, yeah, of course, all legal.
Well, that's the thing there, right? So why did they go ahead with spending all this money, like £86 million? When they didn't even have proper legal clearances, when they didn't even, sure, the lawyers should have been all over that.
Well, it's not necessarily that they have to have spent that, but they may have some obligation. There might be a contract. For example, if you sign a contract that says, I'm going to give you £1 million a year for the next 10 years, so the contract's worth 10 million then, and if you cancel it, you don't just say, all right, that's fine then. You say, you made a contract to pay me 10 million, I'm owed 10 million. So that's most likely what's happened. They've been contracted over a multi-year period to do stuff, to provide services.
No, I understand
right?
that.
And then that's not appeared.
£65 million is a lot of money.
Well, this is going to court. This is going to court.
And it's the drinks industry. Circularity Scotland is the drinks industry. So the drinks industry are owing this money to BIFA. And then the drinks industry are going to come at Lorna Slater and the Scottish Government, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, and it's a win-win for...
And we're talking like companies like Pepsi.
Yes.
They are very, very powerful, very wealthy. And if they take the Scottish Government to court and it does go to court, it's going to cost the taxpayer a lot of money.
Yeah, well, Catherine here says it's poor due diligence from the drinks companies. They should have done their homework. I don't actually think that's the case. I think they knew that they would get their money in any case, because these companies, I think.
I'm sorry, but where did they get the money from?
Well, they'll get it from the government or someone. Yeah, someone.
The government will pay it.
The government will pay it back in the end. Yeah. So they know. They're not going to go into something we think, well, is there a potential for us to lose money at this? No, our laws have been all over this.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. So it's going to be the taxpayers that are on the hook for this.
On the hook.
They'll probably do a deal before it gets to court. They'll probably do some kind of deal done before it actually gets to court. Because if it does get to court, it's going to be quite embarrassing for the Scottish Government. So
it'll drag on for years.
Yeah, there'll be a deal done. But at the end of the day, it's us that's going to pay for it. We will pay for it.
And another way that we're going to be paying for it is that I think there were 66 employees. 40 of them are now filing. They've hired a lawyer and they're filing for compensation. They say that they have been unfairly dismissed. And the money that they're claiming comes from, there's something called the insolvency service, which pays out to people who have been made redundant or let go by companies that have gone insolvent. But guess where the money comes from for the insolvency service? From the taxpayers, of course. So,
of course,
the lawyers who are representing the 40 employees who have so far claimed compensation, the lawyers have said that those in charge of Circularity Scotland made no effort to comply with their legal obligations. In all likelihood, it's the taxpayer who will have to pay for this mistake.
Yes.
So there we go. And as if that wasn't enough, there's also a £9 million loan that was given by the Scottish National Investment Bank to Circularity Scotland. And this week we found out that Nicola Sturgeon had interfered in this decision. She sent a letter to SNIB, the Scottish National Investment Bank, detailing how important Circularity Scotland was before they received the £9 million in funding. So she basically told them that they had to give out the.
Well, this was the thing
£9 million.
we said this almost every week in the show about this fake bank, that basically it's to put money into their political prep projects. It's, and this is a prime example of it. You say, well, we love this project. People come and they say, people come and the people in companies see them as a mark. That's what they do. They say, well, yeah, we're selling this, to meet your green targets. We've got this great thing, it costs all this money here, and why don't you give us a loan for it? And to fulfill their, to burnish their green credentials, people like Sturgeon, quite willing to push the scale, not realizing, maybe they do realize that it's not their money it's just a big risk all round. So it's
really, Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister should never have been involved
in
influencing the Scottish National Investment Bank.
We have the same thing with the what's it called, the ferries and so on. It's just, that's the whole point of it. That's nationalism's a centralising movement. The whole point is to get all the power in the centre and make the First Minister responsible for everything. So that's it there.
Well, Scottish National Investment Bank were in a bit of trouble again this week because they also, questions were being asked about their handling of potential conflicts of interest. It seems that the bank, I'll call it the bank because it's not actually a bank, invested £5 million of taxpayers' money in a company called Forrit, partly owned by one of SNIB's directors.
Yeah, it's no surprise. It's all jobs for the boys and girls, as it were. As long as you're in the club, you can get the money. And as Nicholas says here, it's official law and I cannot organise piss up in a brewery. The problem is that cleanup is going to cost us a fortune. And
there'll be more. There will be more. Yeah.
Terrible.
Really, I mean, all the retailers didn't they say that they had to invest a lot of money as well? Yeah, so we haven't even heard from them yet.
Yeah, they were liable, weren't they? They are liable for paying for. I can't remember what it was now. They're not liable for paying into the company that's gone bust.
Oh, Circularity.
Yeah, they were liable for monies into that. So, but they're talking the 5 big supermarket companies and Pepsi Cola were getting together to do a group
class action
against Scottish. But then you'll see Scottish government, they're going to blame Westminster, which they already have done, and they'll be saying, well, Westminster need to pay it. The UK government need to pay the compensation because it's their fault. So it's going to be another holy mess again, and it'll take years to sort out. And again, it's the taxpayers that'll pay it.
Another big waste of money.
Yeah, and as Karen says here, it's because they don't have any business experience. They think they can solve everything with the government, and they just come straight out of university, think they're the solution to everything, and they just get screwed over by everything. Reality. These companies are not going to be take no prisoners. I mean, certainly that would be my situation if I was one of them as well. I'd not take any risk on behalf of the Scottish Government, for God's sake. Why on earth would you? All right, good segment there, Mary. Things you can do to support the show. You can make a donation to the Majority. Thank you for those who have done so and for your continuing support. You can buy a T-shirt or a mug. Look at this beautiful T-shirt here I'm wearing. We also have mugs, mouse mats, and some other stuff as well. You can find those on our store. You can get a discount if you use the coupon down there. Please hit the like button if you can, and subscribe to the show on YouTube. That's the most important thing, to get more viewers on here, and you can tell your friends about us, or do all of the above, which makes us very happy. So, coming up, it is the moment that you've all been waiting for. It is the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay!
Right. Okay, where are we now? All right.
It's you, Mark.
I don't have my notes here.
No, you don't have your notes?
Yes, I do have notes. No, did you put... Oh, over there.
Okay.
That's what happens when you print two things here. Right, so anyway, my Zoomer of the week is going to be Kelly Given, who you may remember as a Zoomer multiple times, I think, on the show so far, when she said that the tents in Sturgeon's lawn proved that the SNP were the most transparent ever. And I quote, "We've had a forensic tent in the ex-First Minister's garden in full view of everyone. We've got people camping outside her house to seek video of her leaving the house." Like, that is transparency. What else can you possibly want? And also this week she's been calling for Nigel Farage to be debanked, unlike the rest of the country.
What?
And,
Why does she want him debanked?
Just because Nigel Farage, that's why. And so my question is, why are we cursed with such losers? Anyway, you may have missed the news about the Scottish passport. Well, you wouldn't have, because Mark already mentioned that. A passport that nobody cares about and nobody ever thinks is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do you see that, Mark? When Humza said we're going to have this passport, it's going to be Burgundy, so it makes it easier to get back into the EU.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because the passport's the same colour.
It's as if the EU are going to look at a passport colour and say, "Well, that's one of the tick." Let them back in.
I mean, it's a bit weird, isn't it? You think they would do it in blue or something like that, or some kind of
blue's the UK
colours representative of the, like a saltire in the front.
Yellow.
All
I'm surprised it's not yellow.
But the serious issue with this is the cost and how much does it cost to produce.
That's not the only serious issue, Mark.
The cost.
It's the whole concept of it.
Well, the cost of doing this paper, the cost of the civil servants working on this, instead of working on other things that they're meant to be working on, and it costs. It costs. I bet it's cost about £1 million to produce this paper, which is absolutely nonsense. It means nothing. It's an absolute joke. It's never going to be implemented. It's never going to be used. So it just more resources, and that's what Alistair Jack today was on about. This week, he's contacted the First Minister and absolutely crucified him for this, because it's taken away resources from the civil service to produce a paper that nobody wants. Or needs.
I think it feels like they've got them on the ropes a little bit with this one. One of the other things was, and I don't know why it's not here, but basically Humza Yousaf says, after you get this passport, right, you can be free to go and work in England. You're like, what? I'm free to do that right now.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
And isn't that up to England?
Well, that's the other point as well. That's the one thing it may be possible. People haven't talked about that much. But, after any separation, what's to stop the rest of the UK saying, we don't want those people over there English jobs for the English. We've had enough of these Scots taking over, being the Prime Ministers for all these times and, being in high positions all throughout the country. I mean, one nationalism begets another, and that's one of the problems with it. We have to, tamp it down so it doesn't, spread like a virus across the UK. In fact, we just did an article about that on the Majority website by Stephen Bailey, which is called The Domino Effect, and that is.
Please read it.
Yes, it's all about that very idea that Scottish nationalism has emboldened nationalism in the rest of the country. Anyway, back to Kelly.
Well, to Kelly. Isn't Kelly the one that was complaining that Greece was hot?
Greece was hot. Well, it's hot sometimes, but she's I think. Anyway, she was talking about she's saying that this Burgundy passport was great strategy. Here she is.
Mr. Independent Scotland. I mean, opponents of this, critics of this, are saying that we've gone from A to C without figuring out what B actually is. We're spending all this time and all this money talking about Scottish passports and everything else, but in actual fact, we've no idea how it might come to pass.
I disagree with that, because I think, and this is what I've been really longing to see from the independence campaign, is plans for the future. I need to stop talking about the bureaucracy of independence and when we're going to have a referendum and how we're going to get there. To me, that's not the most important issue right now. What I want to do is focus on how we're building independent Scotland. We're never going to convince people to vote for independence until we present the picture of what independence actually could look like. This is how we win people over, and I think actually Humza Yousaf's approach on this is really clever, and I think it will bring people over to the argument.
I mean, isn't that fair?
So really clever, making the passports really clever here.
Burgundy.
We need to stop talking about the bureaucracy of independence and when we're going to have a referendum, how we're going to get there. Not as though that isn't important, but it's more concerned about the passports. You know, we have a word for this. It's called #indiewanking, which is basically, you know, pleasuring yourself to unrealistic images of Scottish independence. And it needs to, it's, you know, that's what this is. When people say there's zero chance of this happening, it's almost like a kind of indie porn or something like that. It's not healthy. It's not good for anyone, and they really need to stop it. And this idea that we don't have to look at the actual mechanics of independence and just accept it because of a Burgundy passport is just
That's what it looks like.
That is the Zoomerism, definitely.
Now we can understand we've got the big picture because we've got this passport. So that tells us the big picture of how Scotland's going to operate after independence.
I mean, I can understand it having the saltire and all that in front of it, or a lion. I like lion.
The rampant lion.
Yeah,
it's
rampant
going to
lion.
change people's minds, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if it was cool, you know,
a colour of a passport and
I want
something
one.
that will never happen is going to start changing people's minds about independence.
It's absolutely nutters. Anyway, that's my Zoomer. Okay, next up is going to be Mary, is it?
No, Mark,
you're up next. Okay, hold on.
Oh, I can go next if you want.
No, it's fine. Okay, and then it's just excuse me because we had some technical issues earlier. We're running a wee bit late, but we'll be done soon. Right, Mark, you're up.
Mine's Katy Loudon, the SNP candidate at the by-election.
Oh, yes.
All over Twitter, she's been blocking everybody. Everybody you can think of it's all over Twitter. It's who's Katy is a hashtag now.
Right, yes.
Because nobody has even interacted with her on Twitter, but yet they're all saying, well, I'm blocked.
No one's interested in her.
And nobody even knew who she was, but she blocked. Right. She's been given a block list, so she's blocked every single person, and even her own constituencies, people in her own constituency are blocked. So how she's meant to campaign and change people's minds if she's blocking everybody? It just shows you the SNP, the way the SNP think. If you disagree with them, just block them.
Well, we haven't been actually, strangely enough,
I haven't been.
We
blocked.
haven't been blocked.
We must not count.
Yes, here, and this for those who are desperate to see her page on Twitter, or X as it's now known. Here it is here. But I did notice, of course, she's out campaigning and talking about what's going on in the.
When did she join? November 2000. Oh, she's been on a long time.
She's been on a long time. She's got 3,000 odd followers.
Okay.
There, but I did
we
notice.
We may be blocked after this show.
Oh, definitely. Look forward to it. But I did notice today at the launch, some weird things were on there. This was her picture of her at the launch today. And she's this one.
Where is she?
Yeah, she's this one here. I have to point her out with the hand. Basically, Kathleen Nutt, who's the politics editor over at the Herald, said basically compared actually with the Labour candidate up here, as we talked about, Michael Shanks talking to the media by himself, whereas the SNP, it was the Humza Yousaf show. So it looks like Humza was blocking her.
Yeah.
Well,
Rita's asking who she is. Rita, she is the candidate for. Sorry. She is the new. She is the SNP candidate for Rutherglen and Hamilton West. That's going to be running in the next by-election.
Yes, so she is a bit of seems to be a bit of a nobody actually, and we talked a little bit about that there. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, they do have a tendency to come on and block you straight away. And good comment there, and then you can't get into any discussion with them. Not that they want any discussion.
No.
Anyway, really. Okay, good one there, Mark. Moving on, we'll talk about. We'll get Mary's up. Just hold on a second.
I've got a winner.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, my Zoomer of the week is that garden gnome perennial Patrick Harvie.
Oh, right.
So this week, Patrick Harvie has accused one of Scotland's richest men, Lord Harvie, of installing cheap kit in Scottish homes in a row over heat pumps. So Patrick Harvie has, as we know, he's proposed, I talked about last week, he's proposed another green loony policy to get all Scottish homeowners to install heat pumps instead of your gas central heating, that you have to replace all of that with heat pumps in your homes. And if you don't, you won't be able to sell your house.
Yes.
And there's a huge cost and what have you. So we talked about that last week. Anyway, Lord Harvie, he's made a large part of his £265 million fortune from selling heat pumps. And he says that heat pumps are not viable in Scottish homes because they don't heat enough in cold weather. And as we all know, it gets pretty cold in Scotland. So he's the guy that's been, selling these. He's made a fortune, and he's telling us these are not going to work in Scotland. He says, of course, everyone wants to do their bit to get to carbon zero. Well, I disagree with that, but there's no way you can say that a heat pump does anything to reduce your footprint. So he's saying it's not even very green. But Harvie, he criticised the quality of the systems being sold by Lord Harvie, and he says, I get entirely why Willie Harvie wants, as a housing developer, to install cheap kit. So he's basically saying that these are just, that he's selling cheap kit. They're not very cheap, are they? It's like between £10,000 and £15,000 a go. So that's not what I would call cheap kit. Anyway, Harvie is furious. He responded, he said, he's made it personal. Now the gloves are off.
Okay.
And I will be calling him out for everything that he's saying about heat pumps that's false. So he's just made an enemy, Patrick Harvie. He said, and Lord Harvie says, it's frightening these people are in charge.
Yes.
So I mean, Harvey's an absolute idiot.
Well, he was on the telly yesterday, I think, maybe, and this is a clip of him talking about heat pumps, and basically he says that they're inefficient and noisy in so many words. Let's have a listen to this.
To continue business as usual in oil and gas extraction. That's very different from saying it might plausibly have a role to play in decarbonising heavy industry.
Let's also talk about the SNP and Green Party proposal, whereby the type of heating in a home will be taken into account when it comes to a property's EPC rating. Is that not punishing those people who cannot afford to, for example, replace an old boiler with a heat pump system when they're looking to sell their home?
No, we certainly shouldn't see this as being about punishing anyone. In fact, Scotland has more financial support to households that are looking to improve their energy efficiency and shift to zero-emission heating than any other part of the UK. Up to £15,000 in combination of grants and loans, with an extra £3,000 for rural areas that qualify.
People will still have to fork out if it's a loan.
Well,
and it's money that people potentially just can't be looking to spend when they're in a cost of living crisis.
The gap between the price of replacing a gas boiler and the replacement with a zero-emission heating system, if you include the Scottish Government's grant, is diminishing all the time. And more companies that are the leading edge of this, they're investing like never before in research and development to make cheaper heat pumps, smaller, quieter, more efficient, able to run at higher flow temperatures.
So basically what he's saying there is the companies are investing in this. The companies, they don't have them. That's what he's saying. He says the companies don't have efficient, quiet heat pumps right now. That's what he's saying. And not only that, you will have to pay, even though if you get a grant off of us, which is taxpayers' money that could go to someone else,
exactly,
then it's still not enough. You're like, no, I don't think so. And, don't dress like a tramp when you're on the telly. So that is the next
Well, maybe he's just come straight out the garden,
Oh, he should be nomad. I would look at that.
I know, but I mean, he sits there and he talks about all the loans and grants and things that people can get, and it is taxpayer money. That's money that could be, put into the National Health Service. It's money that could be used on, building more houses or whatever.
Well, we had them in the States and in Japan. They're not. That's the one we had in the States. What a noise that made! Two of them.
Well, we had one at each side of the house because one wasn't enough.
Absolutely massive things.
They're really
This,
noisy. You have
6
to
feet
stay.
wide.
You have to stay really far away from them.
Absolutely.
You can't have it in your garden. You won't get any peace and quiet in your garden.
It's just a loan as well, so it's still
I know,
you
it's
still have to
ridiculous.
pay for it.
You have to pay it. You've got
You
debt.
still have to pay for
Yeah.
it eventually.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous. Yes. Anyway, okay.
Who's deciding tonight?
I'm not sure. Mark gets to decide.
I'm going to go Patrick.
Oh yes, it's a party perennial.
He is.
He's always coming up. A weed, perhaps.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Coming up in the garden.
Weed.
Imagine that. You just say, yeah, but the manufacturers are going and try to make these things quieter. Or they're trying to make them more efficient. You're like, what? It means they're not efficient.
That means they're noisy and inefficient.
And noisy. Like, I had a guy try to say that as well, and the guy on Twitter tried to say that to me. He said, put our best minds onto it. Like, don't you think the companies that make them have been doing this, trying to improve them for decades? They're rubbish.
I mean, they've got huge, big fans in them, so that's what makes the noise. And they don't work if they don't have those big, huge fans in them. So.
Right. Well, good win there, Mary, and good choice there, Mark. Well, okay. Thank you for being on the show tonight. It was a little bit longer because of technical issues. We'll cut these out, actually, or we're able to cut them out on Twitter. So when people watching catch up, you won't see that stuff. So that's going to be good. And hopefully these technical issues will go away next week. We'll leave you with Thought of the Week. This time, Glacken Reports is a guy who writes for Times, maybe Telegraph, or has just recently stopped writing. They said the Scottish government has operated more like a marketing business for its leaders than a government for its people. Not that marketing has gone all that well, because nationalism is a dead end anyway. Marketing something that's not going to go anywhere. And finally, perhaps people are seeing that change. Anyway. Moving on, we will see you next week. We're so happy to have you on the show with us. And next week, we'll have more chat. So it's good night from me.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Good night.
Okay, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you.